All right, here we are at patch 13.24, perhaps the last patch of the year. My name is Chris, and joined for me for the last time is my patch review duo partner, Jason.
Hey Chrissy, good to be here with you for the final mile. Yeah, let's do it. This is gonna be, I think, our first full season, right? Doing the patch reviews from 1 to 24.
Yeah, I think that's actually true. It's a shame I'll be replacing you next season.
All right, about freaking time.
All right, let's get right into the meat and potatoes of this crapola. We got a new champ. We'll talk about that at the end. For now, let's scroll past the 756 icons that come out every patch.
Oh yeah.
Still scrolling. There we go. Okay, first up we've got Azir. Little tweak after his recent big change to add on hit effects to his shit. I guess since his abilities hit so much, this is probably actually a pretty big buff.
I mean, not a huge one. Even at max rank, it's just 8 per hit. Per soldier. I don't think this is too big, and I think he got bigger nerfs than this in the last patch, right? When they gave him the on-hit scalings.
This champion honestly is just a blur ever since they nerfed him into the ground for me.
Yeah.
It's like they're never happy with how weak he is.
I haven't seen anyone do the Kraken Slayer, which I still want to see, but one of my friends, Tyler, actually, had started trying Azir with Heartsteel, and was finding it was actually giving him a lot of bonus HP, since the soldiers with the on-hit effects can proc the Heartsteel effect now.
Yeah, but you'd never want to be that close to your opponent.
Well, you don't need to be that close, do you? I mean, I guess, no, I think you enter combat with them, and then 4 seconds later you hit them, or something like that, right?
No, you have to stay within like a certain amount of range for the thing to keep ticking to activate.
You have to be in a certain amount of range.
It's like
Yeah,
700.
you may.
It's like 6 or 700.
Well, I mean, that's a
Because
pretty long range. Most melees can't hit you from there.
if you go out of range prematurely, it only like partially triggers, and then you don't get to activate it.
Yeah, it's a little weird. But, what he was saying was he was getting tanky enough that, it was basically like he wasn't going to be spiked even if he mispositioned. Thought it was interesting.
I guess
I
that's
still
one
stick by,
way.
yeah, I still stick by what I said last patch, which is by nerfing him and then adding this, they're either basically spitting in his face and giving him nothing back, or they are actually just busting the champion's balance completely. But
I haven't played with Lich Bane yet. Feel like it could
and
be
in fact,
good.
yeah, Lich Bane could also be a thing. But yeah, like my guess is the fact that they're giving him some of the base damage that they took away last patch means that the on hit really ain't doing anything for him. Until some pro team figures out some way to make it completely busted, and then they have to rework the whole game around him.
Yep. Riot is really digging themselves into a hole.
I agree completely. Like they're cornering themselves when they really don't need to.
They are so committed to making so many changes to this game, they probably don't even realize how many people they're just like turning off and alienating.
I mean, probably just you.
I don't think it's just me. I think most people who have played for longer than like a few years would find a lot of this stuff kind of vexing. If you've only been
Definitely
playing for like
intimidating.
6 months or a year, you're probably like, oh, I didn't even realize all the things that have come and gone.
That is true in the sense of it makes it harder to return if you've been away for a while.
Yeah, like my friend Matt hasn't played since like last April. Oh my god.
Uh huh.
By the time he comes back, they're not even gonna have like Gore Drinker in the game. It's gonna be fucking wild.
I hope they don't have Hullbreaker in the game next time he comes back.
I don't know if that's one of the ones they're getting rid of.
Probably not. That would be the one that they should get rid of.
I took a peek at those next season changes. Oh my god. There are some dumbass ideas. Getting rid of Ludens is like pretty stupid to me, for one.
I mean, there's already 3 other mage items that are just like it. I'm fine with it if we want to get rid of Ludens.
You mean there's 3 other items that are like Ludens?
Yeah.
Well, Ludens came first.
Okay, so rename one of the others Ludens. I don't care. Name it like Ludens Tormentor.
Well, you're right in
You
the
know,
sense that they'll
they've
just...
already changed the noun that Ludens goes with like 2 different times.
You're right in the sense that they'll just bring it back like in another 2 years.
Maybe they can call it Ludens Cough Drop, and it's a consumable.
Alright, let's get back to Braum. I'm already
Yep.
dreading doing that preseason patch with you. It makes me just want to never play again.
I mean, you know, that's what most people say about doing things with me.
Okay.
This is a change that I like.
Yeah, I'm always down for Braum getting more love. I think a lot of the tank supports are fine with getting some more love. A lot of them tend to be kind of dated. So I'm pretty
I'm
cool
not
with
gonna
stuff like that.
needed, but yeah, they can lack playmaking, especially some of the more defensive tank supports.
This is a good
Braum,
change. What I really
yeah,
would have liked to have seen is a big reduction on the static cooldown of his passive in the late game. I think that would really open him up for some usefulness in the late game.
yeah, that would be pretty cool. I mean, he's still useful in the late game. You know, having a somewhat mobile tank that can protect your carry. Like he's still good in the late game. But I agree. Like if you wanted to make him fire, you could reduce the passive cooldown. I like that. Of course, most people just explode in 0.8 seconds now anyway because of all the items. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. The big thing here is the longer knock up for targets that are close by, and secondary targets beyond the first one hit with Brahm's ult. 0.3 to 0.6 is significant, and yeah, gives him more opportunity to either lock down targets or disengage a fight, which I see Braum kind of about 50-50, using his ultimate in either one of those 2 ways.
I used to play Braum like all the time too. Feel like
Yeah,
when
he's
I
a
look at
champion
this
that
champ,
most.
I'm looking back at like myself in high school or something.
He's a champion that I most only play if they have at least 4 AD or 4 AP that I can really like buy a lot of resists and then give those to somebody else with my W. Most of the time, I'd rather have a Leona, or even like a Rel.
What are you smoking, dude? You're just gonna play Morgana or Lulu every game.
I'm expanding my support pool. You just don't play Lance with me.
Okay, next up we've got Briar. We've got some more nerfs. We got less attack speed, less armor, less damage on her dash,
Yep.
more or less attack speed, and then the really cool part about, that I liked is when she just channels with the scream and just heals over time. That's getting nerfed too. I actually really liked that part. It was a really nice, consistent way of healing without having to be all over someone's nuts.
It's completely ridiculous that you can just heal without with as a champ like this without even being close to enemies.
It was odd that it was tied to like her scream, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Then
Yeah. Mhm.
we've got much less scaling on her ultimate, but then goofily more AP scaling on it.
Yeah, that's the only thing they gave her, and it's stupid that they're like, there's absolutely no reason to build Briar AP. I mean, even the Gwynsus, with all the attack speed she has, still, don't do it.
You
Don't do
were
it.
mentioning that people were buying lethality on her, so this is going to
Yes.
hurt too, because now it doesn't do physical damage.
Yeah, even on this patch, I just played a few games earlier today. Like, people were still going Briar, people were still going lethality on Briar. This champ is stupid strong. And like I said when she came out, like they did a bad job making a champion that would be possible to balance well, like a really bad job. This is one of the biggest disasters, not from a design and fun point of view necessarily, but from a balance point of view that they've ever made. And you're not going to convince me otherwise.
I guess you must be on to something.
This is like the 7th time they've nerfed her,
Or
and
she
she came
just
out
gets
like
played a
9
lot in the
patches.
pro scene, so trickle down.
She gets played a lot at every level, and she succeeds at every level. She's impossible. She's literally impossible to run away from. You know, she's hard to bait. She's really hard to kill when she doesn't want to die. Like when she's playing defensively, she just goes into her scream, reduces the damage. They're taking away some damage reduction again from her scream, 40 to 35 here. You know, heals ridiculous amounts of her health. And again, with lethality, can pop you in 2 seconds flat once she hits you. And in that 2 seconds, you are stunned, by the way. So, yeah. This is a very badly designed champion. Whoever designed this should be ashamed of themselves. And look for her to get a lot more nerfs in the coming year. Before they just realize that they can't do anything and kneecap her so hard that she's never played again, and then probably rework her a year or two from now.
Damn, that's some tinfoil Chris Hat stuff you got going on there, dog.
I mean, I know that it sounds a little bit like things you would say, but this is usually the pattern with champs that they have this hard of a time balancing because they're so oppressive.
100% agree with you that she probably was like over 2 when she came out. I don't think she's badly designed. I think she probably was very strong when she came out, though.
Yeah, well, I think the reason she's so badly designed is because that they've made her so stat checky and so lifesteal heavy, so easy to catch up with people. They essentially haven't given her a weakness. The only weakness is that, like, if you hit your ult in the wrong place, you can get yourself killed.
I feel like people should be playing her like and building her more like Warwick than like a glass cannon, honestly.
You would think so, but lethality is so successful they don't even have to. She would be great played like Warwick, but she's even better as this ridiculous glass cannon because she still doesn't die. You could have 2 or 3 people on her, she won't die. Building lethality. Like, I don't know what to say, man.
I did end up playing her top a couple times. It was not the worst thing in the world.
You always have to be really careful when you have, like, a champion with high AD ratios. And by the way, I think that Certain Death used to have 130% or 150% bonus AD ratio when it came out. Now it's 50%. So that's how ridiculously far off they were in terms of the balance mark.
Well, that actually makes a lot of sense, because Urgot's is also ridiculously low damage to make up for the important part of the ability.
But yeah, like, when you have champions that have a lot of AD ratios and a lot of lifesteal, Aatrox comes to mind. You have to be very careful with how you design them. You can't make it too easy to just automatically catch up to people, and you can't give them too much survivability outside of the actual, like, lifesteal part of it. Here she has her E, which is damage reduction and just free maximum heal on the health. She has ridiculous amounts of lifesteal. And she has speed that she can run down a target that's not even threatening her. You know, to get away from targets that are chasing her. So, yeah, between all those things, they've basically given themselves such a thin precipice to actually hit the balance on. That it's practically impossible, especially in a shifting meta. And that's why I say that she's so badly designed. It's not because she's not fun, it's because she's impossible to balance.
I don't know. I feel like they could just kind of give her a little more utility and less, like, killing power, and I think she could easily find a way as, like, kind of an off-tankish type.
I mean, giving her utility for her team she wouldn't be the same champ. And that would probably be the way to go, you know, but then it's not even the same champ. That would be a much better designed champ.
Alright,
so just look for a million more nerfs over the coming season. Play Briar now while you can. It's free low.
Alright, next up, we've got a pretty good buff for Galio. This would actually really help.
Pretty funny bug on Draven. You want to read that real quick?
I did actually read that. That is a oddly powerful bug.
Causes himself to be executed if the ultimate returns to him while his adoration stacks are too high.
That almost feels like they were trying to give him a second passive to avoid him losing adoration stacks. That's what it sounds.
And the axis will return to me. Oh God, my arm! Oh, I just took my arm clean off.
Yeah, that is humorous how that could have snuck it in there.
Yeah.
Alright, next
Right.
up we've got a nice buff to Galio, and this,
Boy.
for the people still trying to lane this champion, this is definitely a very nice buff. This is definitely what you have to max first in the laning phase, if you're going top or mid.
Yeah.
And this is not what you'd really want to max if you were playing him support, though.
Correct.
So
And
it's
you
a
want the
good thing.
taunt, but yeah. But yeah, this is nice for his wave clear. His waves clear is still pretty bad. But I have seen a
No,
little more Galio recently, and a lot of
his
them build either mixed or AP.
his wave clear is really good. It's just the threat that he puts himself in trying to wave clear is kind of unacceptable, because he really needs his passive over and over to wave clear, and it's just so
Yeah.
easy for champions to give him a hard time.
Right. So I often think of his wave clear as just as Q because anything else will just, make him take 30% of his health. But yeah, that's a pretty nice change. I think Galio's bubbling under the point where he's like reasonable to play again.
I think one that they should do is lower the mana cost on his Q. It's still pretty up there. If they made it a little more spammable, I think he'd have a better time.
Yeah. And I know that he's like a magic resist specialist, but if they gave him a little bit more armor, that would help too.
Probably.
All
Alright,
right.
next we've got an absolutely brilliant buff to Gragas, and this buff is about 13 years overdue. And now his passive doesn't just stay at the same cooldown that it has been the last 12-13 years. Now in the
Okay.
late game, he can actually use his abilities more often to heal some more during fights and stuff, which I feel like it was kind of the original intention of this ability. So now
Yeah.
going into the late game, this is definitely going to feel a lot more impactful, especially for the clowns that aren't just building goofy AP items.
Right. And this is based off of his maximum health. So late game, not only will it be happening more, but it'll be a much bigger effect. This is pretty nice. Remember that the cooldown on this is static, so it doesn't scale with ability haste. And given the fact that there is less effect from building tons of ability haste on the cooldown, what was it? His was it the slam that used to take off like a fixed number of seconds if you hit it?
The slam only reduced its own cooldown if you hit an enemy,
Right.
not as passive.
Right. But I'm saying that the happy hour requires you to use a skill to trigger this, and with the slam reducing its own cooldown by like 4 seconds every time you hit it, people were using that slam with a lot of ability haste, like every 2 or 3 seconds, basically meaning that you'd be able to use happy hour whenever you wanted to.
Well, if your
Um,
W is maxed out and you're able to find a target to expel the enhanced auto, you can also repeat your W pretty fast too.
oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Either way, given that they kind of like quote unquote fixed that little abuse case on him 1 or 2 patches ago, I feel completely comfortable with giving Gragas more ability to heal himself in the late game. I think this is cool.
This is going to be a very powerful buff in A
I don't
rank.
think it's a total game changer. I think it's nice.
For tank Gragas, I think it's a big deal.
I mean, it's
AP
again,
is
it's
going to be
nice,
like kind of an
right?
afterthought.
Late game team fights when he's 16 usually don't last more than about 7 or 8 seconds, and then they're essentially over. So maybe he can use this twice instead of once.
Alright, let's move on to the most important change of this patch. We've got some changes here to Ivern.
That was going to be Draven executing himself.
Well, you're right, that was probably more important than this.
Okay, but second most important, Ivern changes.
We got 20 less health because he was way too good of
Apparently
a
way too
front to back like team fighter lately.
Yeah.
And then now we have less of a slow on his exploding portion of his W or E.
Chrissy, can I be honest for a second?
I'm here. I'm listening.
I've been playing quite a bit of League in the last few months. My health's been slightly better. And ever since they reworked, they get that like mini rework to Ivern with the trigger seed that activates twice. I literally have not seen one Ivern in any game in any mode ever.
Well, that makes sense. He just has a fundamentally overly niche kit that isn't really satisfying to greedy people who want to carry.
Not one.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
This Ivern is not a champion designed around the ego of a League of Legends player.
that's definitely true.
That would be my
Trash
take on it.
Brothers are designed around the ego of a League of Legends
Exactly.
player.
That's why he'll always be popular, and that's why Yon will always be popular. Same thing.
Yeah, well, he's a Trash Brother too.
Anyway, he's too good.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Cassante, who finally has a simple change that we can talk about with some more precision. His
Okay.
W, less mana, but the scaling is going through the roof, which is cool.
Yeah.
I like his W. It does feel satisfying. It's very reactive. Responsive, I mean.
This is a little surprising to me, because I don't know. When I see Cassante is usually pretty good. I'm surprised that they think he needs a buff.
I think if they just tone down his like ultimate potential, I don't think there's ever a problem with giving his kit outside of his ultimate any number of buffs. I think outside of his ultimate, I feel like he's still a somewhat underwhelming champion, especially in the laning phase. But then when he just gets his ultimate, his Q just becomes too cheesy, you know?
Yeah, the Q is so good, with just like how ridiculously often you can use it, and then just how long he survives. And like you always say, he's very disruptive in fights. Can take a carry out of it and then not die to the carry. Can isolate a support or something like that and just take them down. Yeah, he's very good, and I'm surprised to see him get a buff here. This isn't a huge buff. Like Pathmaker isn't one of his main abilities. Generally when you're looking at things that are going to move the needle on Cassante, it's his Intofo strikes. But yeah, anyway, like surprised to see him get a buff. He's very good.
Alright, next up, we've got a juicy buff to Leona, where she's getting more resistances in the laning phase. If you've played any amount of support Leona, you know it's all about that W max for the good trades.
Absolutely.
And,
You skill it last, but you max it first.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. And this is just going to make her even more obnoxious in the trading department. Even if you're not taking Aftershock, which is icing on the cake, or you're one of those Ignite boys, this is going to just be super good for her lane consistency. And the extra flat damage on her ultimate, it's just a chef's kiss with her ability to kind of finish the job, you know?
Oh yeah. Like Leon at level 6, especially with 50 more base damage now on it, is super dangerous. Can often just 1v1 a carry, like in that early to mid game. Yeah. This really seems to be the everyone loves tanks patch, doesn't it?
I'm glad to see her getting a little love.
Leona. Yeah, nice to see somebody still loves them.
I think Leona's aged a little bit better than Braum, to be honest.
I agree. Leona's definitely always good with the amount that she can, especially since they've over time reduced the cooldown on her bread and butter stun, her Q, a few times. Yeah, Leona's really good. My guess for why she needs buffs here is they recently gave a big nerf to Even Shroud, and Even Shroud was the Leona item.
It was good.
Yeah. So, even though she's a good champion, she's probably been hurting a little bit with how badly that item got knocked off. In fact, I don't even build it on her since they reduced it from 10% to 7%. I usually go the giant like glacial fist thing. I always forget the name of that item.
Frostfire Gauntlet.
It's not Frostfire, but it is the Gauntlet. Iceborne Gauntlet.
Iceborne, whatever.
We got it together.
I think it was Frostfire Gauntlet at one point.
Yeah, that was a different item though. That had the burn, but yeah. The Iceborne Gauntlet is what I usually go with. Or I buy the Sheen early.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
I think I'd just be a greedy bastard and get Jack Shows because it synergizes so well with her W.
Oh yeah, Jack Show is definitely reasonable. But yeah, Even Shroud was the Leona item and still probably the best place to use an Even Shroud. Like it's just Oh man, I hate that they knocked its effect down by a third just out of the blue. Anyway, that's probably why she needed the buff, and good to see her get it.
Alright, next up, we've got a small buff to Lucian.
Uh huh.
This really isn't super unimpactful. It kind of just takes advantage of the fact that you want to max this last because it doesn't do damage, while his Q and W do have a damage component. If they had actually taken even 1 second off the final rank of this ability, this would have actually been a pretty huge buff with how fast he can reduce the cooldown of this with his auto attacks and his passive.
I agree with that, but that should the fact that it's a few seconds lower at lower rank should get him out of more ganks early on and let him apply a little bit more pressure, knowing that his dash will come up sooner, right?
Yep, absolutely true. Same with
Yeah.
like Rocket Jump, Valkyrie. You know.
Sure. And I think that that is a useful thing in this meta of League. Like this is not like a trash buff.
Yeah, Lucian's actually been my go-to AD carry for the past few years.
Oh, really? Even in the current meta with all the ridiculous like ADC items?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of when you're playing with a bunch of people you don't know, playing the like ability AD carries, I feel like is way more effective than playing the hyper carries. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely I would definitely agree with that in a less coordinated game. I just think that some of the hyper carry ADCs right now, just because the items are so ridiculously good.
I play a pretty nasty Cork too.
Corkster, you playing bot lane?
Yeah, he's super good. He
All
scales
right.
like one day he's gonna get like fucking nerfed into the ground because he scales like a redonkulous crazy bastard with the way his passive functions. I'll crit you for 800 magic damage. Okay,
I mean,
next up.
that's basically like 2 shots from Tristana with a probably 1 shot from Tristana with a Kraken Slayer.
Yeah, but every character in the game's armor per level ends up way
Uh-huh.
higher than their MR.
Fair point. Fair point.
So he does way more than you think. Plus, there's a ton of champions that do consistent physical damage. There's only a handful that do super consistent magic damage.
Yeah, you're talking only battle mages and Ziggs, and maybe Xerath.
Not even Ziggs. I would think like Ryze, Cassiopeia, Azir.
Well, those are the battle mages. Yeah, Rise, Cassiopeia. Yeah, I mean
Gwen.
those are the
Yeah.
battle mages. Yeah. What's her name? Oh man, I'm freaking blanking. Whatever. Let's talk Kaiser.
Alright, this is an extremely juicy buff for Mordekaiser because what's not stated here is when it's a single target, this effect gets increased by like 40%. So this will now bring the single target ratio to over 100. If I'm not mistaken, it'll be like 105, 107% of his AP now. So even if you're just buying that Rylas, you're just buying that Riftmaker, this is still going to give the bonk a pretty juicy buff. Very juicy, considering this
Yeah,
is free and on a short cooldown. This is a monstrous buff for Mordekaiser.
yeah. I just looked it up. It's 40 at min rank and 60% increase at max rank.
Okay, scales.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty big.
Does it say on his wiki what the new number is? Because I think it was like 94, 96 when they're by themselves. That's what it used to be.
Well, 60% of 70% ratio would be 42%, so it would be 112% AP.
Okay, it's even higher than I thought.
Yeah, at max rank when they're isolated.
Yeah, ability haste isn't really accessible on Mordekaiser, but the Q cooldown is already super low. So, pretty juicy. I'm surprised they'd actually go there with this. With how consistent his DPS already is. What I would have liked to have seen, I would forego this buff. I would just want a big buff out of his W. I feel like his W could use some love.
Yeah, Kaiser's just such a good champ in general. I don't think he needs any buffs, but
I agree.
Juggernauts have struggled a little bit recently in this meta. There's so much access to mobility to other types of classes, and the Juggernauts can't really dip into that anymore.
You know, I always say this to my friends when they talk about Mordekaiser, and everyone always talks to me like I'm out of my fucking mind because I don't feel like a lot of people. I don't actually know anyone other than my friend Matt who agrees with me on this, who've actually played a lot of Mordekaiser. But he is not good in the late game. A lot of people think you're out of your fucking mind if you say that. He is not good in the late game. He is so... For the same reason the old Mordekaiser wasn't as good in the late game unless he got his hands on a really dope ghost in the olden time. But he is like just kited so easily, and if his ultimate doesn't end up getting the job done, he looks like a complete fool that can't get away. He's not going to escape.
If his ultimate doesn't get the job done late game, he is a complete fool because it should be very easy to isolate someone in your zone and get him.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you got to get over there to ult him, and people can. There's more ways than ever to like get out of his ultimate, probably, and there probably will be in the future.
Juggernauts are traditionally not that great in the late game, and I would challenge you to name 2 Juggernauts that are better than Mordekaiser late game. I can think of 1.
Well, that's kind of a... I mean, it depends on what you think is a Juggernaut. I could think of a few that I think... You say are... Did you say that are good in the late game or better than Mordekaiser?
Better than Mordekaiser in the late game, because I'd say Mordekaiser is decent in the late game.
In the Supreme late game, I'd say like Olaf, Udyr, probably better than him in the Supreme late game.
I don't know. I don't know that I want an Olaf late game.
Dude, full build Olaf, man. Full build Olaf, man, can still be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And Udyr, I honestly think Udyr is even nastier.
I was going to say Darius is probably the best late game Juggernaut.
Actually, no, I think he's probably worse than Mordekaiser. Because the faster the pace of the game accelerates, the worse Darius becomes because of the way
Udyr, I don't really think of as a Juggernaut. He's just kind of weird.
Well, he's got to be something. He's not a dedicated tank.
I don't know. Like, what is Singed? You know what I mean? Like,
Singed is a dedicated tank. I would say he is in the sponge, the sponge subcategory, like Mundo.
Maybe.
But Singed is a tank.
Yeah, I just think that like his playstyle is so different. I would say the same thing about Udyr. Yeah, but I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I don't know. Kaiser's decent late game. In any case, I'm surprised to see him buffed here, but it's probably just because Juggernauts have struggled a little bit in general.
I tell you, this is going to make the old Q, and then you flash right before it hits, so the Q goes way out far, and no one knows it's coming. It's going to make the old flash Q bonk even more fun.
Oh, the flash Q bonk with 112% AP.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, he missed it, and then you flash forward, and then it just randomly teleports the Q way further.
Yeah.
Because of the way Flash works. Oh, man, nobody sees that coming, man. Because it looks like it already hit the ground, and then you flash like, ah!
Those poor saps never saw it coming and didn't feel a thing.
Alright, next up, I don't even want to talk about Qiyana. Let's skip down to...
More mana. Yep, that's it.
Oh, this talent change is actually kind of important. I used to be a big talent player prior to his rework. I'm embarrassed to say that. I don't say it with any pride. Before his rework, I used to really like playing talent.
Okay.
But that was back when he was much easier to play.
Easy level 2 back in the day.
He was just way easier to execute overall before his rework. Anyway, if you play any amount of Talon, you know when he's in melee range, he crits, but what you may not know is that his Q is automatically coded to do a second auto attack really fast, automatically every single time. Now when he lands, he'll also do the super fast auto, instead of just when he's in melee range, which is definitely a buff. Got anything to add on that?
No, not really. I think you explained it very well.
Yep. It's going to be very nice, especially for people that have dashes themselves or flash away really fast, because it won't matter. Because if that Q is moving, it's going to hit you even if it looks like it's bullshit, because that's League physics. Okay.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, do you think that they did this because they actually wanted to give Talon a buff, or do you think somebody at Riot just came up with, hey, we could reset his auto on this, and they're like, okay, let's just add it in, like, regardless of balance?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it was kind of a special thing that only the melee one reset his auto attack timer, and I definitely don't think Talon needs a buff. He's niche, but he counters some very important things and is dominant in a very special way in regard to the other assassins, that he's actually good against countering other assassins because of the way his ultimate functions, how he kind of denies like a counter reaction because of his ultimate, and the speed of his combo. I don't really think he needs to be touched. He's pretty good from now until the rest of the time. Yeah.
Alright.
That's just my take on it. Okay, we got some buffs to Zeri, who I guess is in a very awkward place. I have not seen this champion. I think I've seen Ivern in more games than this champion, to be honest, ever since her release, and she was nerfed 6,000 times.
I've definitely seen Zarya a couple times, but yeah, not that much. So they gave her a. It's probably like a moderate buff, right? Like it's about 10 more AD at level 18, and I always forget exactly how the numbers add up on the Ultra Shock laser, but I don't know, 20 to 30 seems pretty big.
20 to 30?
Does this continuously do damage, or is it just like 30 plus an AD ratio?
Oh, this is the base amount plus a large amount of your total AD.
Okay, so this is only like 10 more damage one time on the laser though?
Doesn't hit you more
Yeah.
than once.
It does hit you more than once. Okay, that's what I was asking.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No. It works the same way as Jinx's E. It's like,
Right.
yeah, you just shoot it out there. If it hits terrain, it just goes further.
Isn't that her W?
No, her W is just another dash. that
No.
gives her dashes.
Yeah, I mean Jinx's W is Zap. Jinx's E is the Chompers.
Maybe you're right. Whatever.
Yeah. No, but good point. Good point. So this actually isn't as big of a buff as I thought, but it's still nice for her. One thing that I thought I wasn't sure if we missed it or if it mattered at all. If we go back to Vel'Koz, there's a couple bug fixes, but there's a new effect on his E, which says the missile now spawns near the target location.
Yeah,
Does that matter?
Me and Johnny talked about this because for a second,
Hi, Johnny.
Johnny was talking to me, and for a second, I thought that they were changing his knockup to be like Cho'Gath's Q, where it has no projectile and it just shows up under you. But
Yeah.
then I had to explain to Johnny what this actually means, and what it really is they're just stopping it so you can cheese it out with Flash and make it kind of hide the animation and hide the projectile, is what it really doing. I was actually hoping he was right, and this was going to make it more like Rupture instead of just shooting it out there and then it blows up. Because I think that would make it more difficult to react to.
And this isn't going to change the timing at all?
No, I don't think it's going to do that.
How long it takes to create the zone before it then like pauses for an instant and knocks people up?
It's not changing the functionality at all.
I see. That's a shame.
Yep.
They'll need some love.
All right, that does it for the champions. Now let's talk about another champion. Right?
All right, show me the way.
All right. The newest champion in the game. I guess he's supposed to kind of be like a Xerath Lux type. Or maybe he's closer to Ziggs is a better way to explain it. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see the Ziggs thing.
I will quickly scroll down so no one is subjected to the likes of his model. All right. Let's start with his
He
passive.
does look like a wannabe Aphelios, doesn't he?
I honestly think Aphelios looks much better than he does. I mean, I guess if Aphelios was like wearing
You're such an Aphelios stan.
if Aphelios was like wearing his pajamas and like watching Sunday football, then yes, you'd be right.
I mean, you know, does Aphelios seem like the Sunday football type of guy to you? Because he doesn't to me.
No, Aphelios seems like the guy who would be like in his basement secretly plotting to kill Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, but
he'd have like all those red strings pointed to different things on the wall.
I feel like Aaron Rodgers might secretly be plotting to kill himself.
That's too far, Jason.
I'm sorry.
Okay. One thing I do like about this champion is this, even though he has a bunch of abilities, they are pretty easy to understand and pretty simple to get through. And there's nothing that really jumped out at me as too crazy. It's kind of just a bunch of like 2012 stuff here, all rolled into just a bunch of different buttons. But first things first, we got to get the insane plagiarism out of the way. This champion is 100% a ripoff of the like 2005 hero from Dota 1 and Dota 2, and that's the Invoker. This is exactly how Invoker works from Dota.
Yeah.
I know you've never played Dota 1 or 2, but in
No,
Dota
I know
1,
about Invoker. Yeah.
there was this old white wizard guy who looked like Gandalf the White, and his name was just Invoker, and his buttons worked exactly the same way, where the combination you pushed would give you a different ability, and he also had like 15 skills, where everyone else in that game had basically 4, just like in League. 100% plagiarism.
And basically, the way that it's being done here, I believe, right, is that they're basically arranged into 3 sets of 4 skills, essentially, because you can do the QR, the WR, whatever.
Well, no, it's just 3 sets of 3. If you do the R, it just clears out. It clears your current selection, so you can do a different one. Every QR, ER,
you're right.
WR
So
is
it is
just
3 sets
clearing.
of 3. It's exactly like Invoker.
Yeah,
But
identical.
it's kind of arranged into 3 sets of 3, right? Where like all the things that begin with Q share a cooldown and a mana cost. All the things that begin with W share a cooldown and a mana cost. Did Invoker work like that too?
That's exactly how he worked.
Exactly like that. Oh, this is just complete plagiarism, dang.
100%. He was one of my favorite heroes, right up there with Admiral Kunkka, the Lightning Panda, and Omni Knight, Abaddon. Those are my favorite heroes in Dota.
Mm-hmm.
And Invoker was one of my favorite. That was a lifetime ago.
Eyeball to the target location. I never thought I would read that phrase in my life, Chrissy.
What'd you say?
Hwei tosses an eyeball to the target location.
Well, we'll get to that. First off, let's start with this passive. For 2023's sake, this is a pretty humble passive. It's just basically who has a passive that's like the same damn thing as this?
Damaging them with a different ability consumes the mark. So this is a lot like Leona or Lux.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, Lux, that makes sense.
Yep. Hit an ability, consume the mark by hitting something else or an auto. Yeah. The difference is this needs 2 different abilities rather than an ability and an auto.
Yeah, and this is an area of effect, whereas Leona's and Lux's is just single target.
Right. So in some way, it's a little bit like not brands. Oh my god. Vel'Koz's, and in some way, it's like Leona or Lux. This isn't bad. This is at least better than Renata Glass next auto attack will deal 1% of the enemy's maximum health.
Well, I believe this guy is 100% intended to be a mid laner, but I can definitely see him getting some support action with some of this harass stuff he can do.
I've only seen him mid lane.
Yeah, but that's how it always starts with like the weirdos. They start out mid, and then when they kind of flame out, they spend the rest of their lifetime going support.
Given how powerful and how squishy he is, I could see him being an APC bot line.
All right. First thing about this passive, it looks very central to his laning phase in terms of wave clear. Because you just tag one thing, then you hit it with one of his auxiliary spells, and then he can probably just take out the casters or something.
Yeah, and with a 30% AP ratio and no cooldown, like this is definitely a good wave clear tool. Even once you hit the mid game. I don't think it has any cooldown either, does it?
Nope, no cooldown. And that's huge. That is huge. Speaking of cooldown, I get the feeling this is probably going to be an extremely ability haste centric champion to get the most out of his versatility.
I could see it, but his AP ratios are really good too. I would not sleep on just building a lot of AP.
Yep, that is true, and he did receive a hotfix. We'll get to that at the very end. He's already had a bunch of changes in the hotfix. All of them for the better.
Buffs or nerfs or just quality of life?
All buffs.
Okay.
And yeah, these changes we're reading right now already reflect the buffs, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they do.
Got it.
Okay, first up, we've got the QQ. Let's start getting through this grind. This one is just his straight up bread and butter thing you're probably going to be using the most of his Q rotation. The harass and the farming shenanigans. This is kind of going to be like Karma's Q or Milo's Q. It looks from the reading of it. Yep.
Okay, yeah. Slings a fireball. I guess you can think like a brand Q as well, even though it has a very different function.
You know what? This guy's kit actually looks pretty fun. It's a shame he looks so dumb. I like the health shred on this first part of the Q ability. That seems very juicy. Doesn't really matter so much that the base amount's terrible. Kassadin's basically got the same problems because the scaling on this is pretty generous. And this gets to a pretty low cooldown later on, and that's not even with ability haste. This guy
Yeah.
definitely is going to be spitting some action in the late game.
Yeah, just obviously a very high mana cost. Have to assume he's going to build tier, right?
Yeah, I did notice that all of his abilities cost a shitload of mana.
Yeah, I wonder why they did it this way. These are some of the highest ability costs I've ever seen. Sorry, mana costs I've ever seen for a champion that is going to spam their abilities late game.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, like you said, Q is good function, good functionality, good damage, burns maximum health. What else is there to say? QW.
Alright, this next one is kind of like a finishing move, sort of. The starting with it's kind of pathetic, but based on how low they are, the damage starts rapidly getting into crazy Xerath W territory, but even more ridiculous. The base amount goes all the way up to 560 with 100% scaling. That's the ceiling on this. Obviously, if you put a point in your Q, it boosts up the ranks on all of his Q stuff, I figure.
Yeah, tons of execute damage if they have missing health and are either immobilized or isolated. And don't forget that when you hit this, you've likely hit something else recently, and you might be able to create the zone under them and do even more damage. It's pretty wacky.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, it says target range 1900. Is that fucking for real?
I've seen him hit it pretty high distances.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure that 1900 is correct, but if that's what it says, I believe it.
Yeah, that seems pretty excessive. I mean, that's like rank 2 or 3 of Kog'Maw's ultimate.
Yeah, I think it might even be more than that.
Yeah, that seems pretty psychotic, so you definitely better not be recalling like a lazy
Probably
bastard.
like a Swain W.
Oh no, his is... That thing's like across the map.
1900 is a lot.
Yeah, think of it like in
Yeah.
terms of Caitlyn's. This is
Uh-huh.
like a little over 3 Caitlyn's, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's enormous.
Yeah. That's the only thing that seems a bit overtuned about this ability. It doesn't mention right here what like the radius is, but I'm hoping this isn't like Volibear's E. It's like that
No,
giant
it's
circle.
not. If I remember it correctly, it's not huge. Like, you do need to actually target it pretty well.
Yeah, if this was like as small as like Jarvan's flag or something, then I'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, that's pretty tough to hit.
Well, as a reminder, though, right? Like, you're trying to use this on somebody who's immobilized, unless you're using it as an execute.
True.
So it doesn't even matter how small it is if they're immobilized.
Or it says, or they have to be isolated from their allies.
Right. So that's a good way to use it for if somebody's like peeling off from a fight. You can use it as an execute.
Yeah, yes, that's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to give this guy a try in A round and get the hang of this. I feel like the first thing you gotta do is remember what all these buttons do.
Pretty much, yeah. There's a lot of skills to remember here.
Alright, and then the last one, I think this is supposed to be the utility. I don't know if the third one is always like the utility button on all of them. This one looks more like the utility option amongst the Q choices. So, so what do we got here? We got some volcano shit. This kind of sounds like it's like Vel'Koz's W, or it has the after effect that erupts. Actually, it sounds like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, one thing not to sleep on is the slow area. In addition to the fact that he already can speed up his allies, actually makes him pretty good at peeling allies from enemies. I know that, like you were saying, that you might see him support. I get that. But even as a mid laner or a carry, like he is good at peeling allies. And
Wait. You said this gives his allies movement speed?
no, he has other things that give his allies movement speed.
Oh, okay.
Right, but in combination with this, which will slow enemies, he's very good at peeling.
Alright. Let's see how much. Now, even the total damage numbers on this are actually pretty generous. So, yeah, his Q is loaded for bear on all three of these options. E definitely is like the runaway button, though. Or the QE, I mean to say.
Yeah. Otherwise, you usually want to use the QQ or the QW.
I definitely see him spending 70% of the game queuing things. QW and QW and queuing. I see that QQ probably coming out the most. Okay, next up we're going to move on to the W series options. And this is the much more utilitarian side of the champ I'm sensing here. Alright, first up we've got the Floating Current. And this makes that path come up that you were talking about that gives his allied champions bonus movement speed, and 20 to 30 is nothing to snooze on when you consider.
This is really nice. Yeah.
When you consider one rank in this ability is as strong as Ghost is at like level 1 or 18, so pretty good.
Yeah, and it's very reasonable for him to have 500 to 700 AP late game, meaning it's actually like 45% bonus movement speed for everyone moving through this path, and it's a pretty big path. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great catch-up and escapability right here. Unlike a lot of other utility skills, this does not heal or shield. So, it's probably worth remembering. But
yes, but if I'm not mistaken, there's a number of effects in the game where you can achieve the effect just by buffing them in some sense, not even having to be a heal or a shield.
Yeah. I think like Echoes of Helia, for example, is one of them. And then you'll get that big heal on your ally.
One thing I could see changing about this ability is the length of this speed up. This seems, unless this thing's way smaller than I'm visualizing, and I haven't seen this guy in a game yet, 4 to 6 seconds is probably pretty generous. I could see them dumping this down to like 2.5 to 4.
So listen, it lasts for 4 to 6 seconds, but you will not be in the zone for 4 to 6 seconds. I would say if you're running through it fast speed, maybe you'll be in the zone for 2 seconds.
Alright.
Yeah, it's big, but it's not huge.
Another thing to take into consider is the cooldown on his Q is drastically lower than the overall cooldown of all of his W abilities. So, kind of backs what I was saying earlier, that Q is going to be like Spam Town and W is going to be the I gotta think about things buttons.
John Hennigan, the mayor of Spamtown.
Alright, next up we've got Pool of Reflection, and this is going to be the AoE shield, if I'm not mistaken.
This is the shield, yeah.
Yep, this looks kind of cool, honestly. They're always really hesitant to give any buttons like this any kind of power whatsoever, because then you're basically back to Locket or Seraphine problems, or back to the way Karma's W used to be in the olden times.
Oh, absolutely, but after 8 other skills, they ran out of ideas.
So we go over here and we max this out, and you look at the final figures of this, and they're actually kind of pathetic. Which doesn't really surprise me too much. They've always been really hesitant to give these kinds of abilities any kind of oomph.
Well, yes, but it does refresh. So, I think if the shield has been broken, you get it every quarter second.
Yes,
every time it's broken.
I'm over on my. I know you can't see this, but on my screen I have it maxed out, so you can see what the total potential of like unlimited refreshes or whatever could be.
Oh, total maximum shield of 90 to 170. Sure. But if you're taking like blink damage while you're in there, it refreshes a bunch of times.
6 times, right?
Well, up to 12 times, because it's 3 seconds and it refreshes every quarter second. Up to 13 times, technically.
So what I'm reading on my screen is he gets 170 plus 60% AP shield.
That's the most he could have at once, but not the most maximum value he can get from it if you keep getting plinked, if your shield keeps being hit while you're in there.
Oh, well, maybe this is secretly more potent than I think it is. But even if it is, these ally numbers are absolutely pathetic. I gotta say. I mean, I guess in the late game this would probably be nice, but you're probably taking so much damage so fast, it's not even probably super
Yeah,
effective
reduced
then.
by 50% for allies. Yeah, yeah. I agree, and I think that's maybe part of the reason, or part of what they were doing to get him out of the support role. I don't know for sure. We can talk about it more as we go through. But yeah, the shield for himself is nice. It's not going to stop him from being burst late game, and a lot of the counterplay to Hui seems to be just burst him really quickly. But if you don't burst him really quickly, oh man, does he go off late game? Like he has like Trashua level scaling.
I can see that. I feel like his Q spam probably seems pretty devastating in the late game, I imagine.
Uh-huh.
Especially when you have to watch out for like super long range thunderbolts every 3.5 seconds.
Right.
Alright, next up we've got the final portion of his W, the WE combo. And this one's kind of an interesting effect. It's been ages since there's been a mana restoration thing in the game. Unless Yumi's done that at one of the 56 different versions of her.
No, I don't think Yumi has that right now.
Anyway, so this might be kind of what makes up for him having such ridiculous abilities, because if he hits all 3 autos, he more than makes up for the cost of any of his 3 buttons. Even with only 1 rank in his W, all 3 shots will add up to slightly more than the cost of his Q, W, or E.
Themselves next 3 basic. Oh, okay, yeah. And I forget whether like if he uses an ability and misses it, whether he loses a charge of this or whether he just gets it back.
Yeah, the fact that he just can apply this with another ability actually seems too good. If he actually had to utilize auto attacks to do this, like Zoe has to do for like her passive, that seems like it'd be more of a sensible limiter. Knowing that he can just keep tossing his shit out there and get mana back, that might be too good for the moment.
Yeah, so let's just do a real quick calculation, right? Let's say he's got rank 2 in this. So he's going to get 150 mana back. The W costs 95 mana to cast. So it is only plus 55. Let's say he tries to hit the other ability to proc it one time with his Q. His Q costs 105 mana. So between the two, he's still 55 mana behind. And he's only gotten the damage from his Q. I actually think this is completely reasonable.
I think you're not taking into account his passive. Because if his passive triggers this too, it'd be an easy, even another stack.
Well, right, but again, you're getting a total of 150 mana back for 3 total hits. You spent 95 mana to cast this thing. There's no way of getting around that, I don't think. I don't think that tier decreases your mana cost or refunds a percentage anymore, or if it does, it's very little. So even if you did 3 autos, right, you'd only be 55 mana ahead. If you actually had to use one of your abilities to proc this, you'd be mana behind. So this is not as ridiculous as it seems by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't think the numbers are super ridiculous. I think the ease of proccing it is super ridiculous.
Yeah, but the easy ways to proc it, right, are not your auto attacks, but rather using an ability and then having your passive or whatever proc it.
Yeah.
And when you use the ability, you're spending a lot more mana than you're getting back. So I think it's okay.
I just looked up. This guy has an auto attack range of 550, so that's pretty modest.
Yeah. Yeah, I in fact, this to me is the Twisted Fate blue card. That's exactly what this is. This is, I am giving up pressure for the next, 10 seconds in order to get a little bit of sustain, and I mean a little bit of sustain.
Well, not necessarily, because Twisted Fate's blue card is also the one that does the most damage.
Sure, but you're often using that as against a minion for sustain, because if you walk up with a blue card, they're going to murk you, because you don't have your gold card.
True that. Twisted Fate problems.
Yeah, this to me really does feel like the Twisted Fate blue card. Another champion that has 3 different abilities on 1 button.
Yep. And then what we haven't talked about is the honestly super strong like Nashor's effect of this thing, where he straight up just enhances his auto attacks or his abilities too to
Oh, that's
attack with
right. The abilities
more
as well.
magic
Yeah.
damage on hit. And this is just ridiculous. This is
Okay, so
basically
this is actually a pretty badass blue card.
his passive again, which also probably applies
Yes.
on his passive on his next 3 attacks. So this
Yes.
is some wicked synergy with like his Q and his passive.
Yeah, this is a plus 60% AP ratio if you hit all 3 parts of it. In 9 seconds, which seems very reasonable. This is basically dealing 60% AP damage on what is a sustained skill. Yeah, it's pretty wacky. That's a
Yeah,
badass blue card.
I gotta say, between this or his passive, I see one of these being tuned down some point in the future because there's too much accessibility for too little like thinking power invested. If you
Well,
know what
you
I mean.
know that with a champion like this, they have to release him in an overpowered state because people are going to take a while to get used to him. And then as soon as the pros get used to him, he's going to take nerf after nerf after nerf because he's going to be 100% pick ban.
Well, because of the type of champion the kind of type of mage he's kind of be,
Uh-huh.
I'm not 100% sure he's going to see a lot of nerfs because we
Really?
haven't. I mean, Ziggs historically has not really seen any nerfs, really.
Ziggs doesn't have 9 buttons.
Yeah, but over time, if he's only been
Mhm.
buffed, basically, he's been nerfed very few times, and the few times he has been nerfed have been nerfs to like his wave clear.
Yeah,
So,
or his harass.
a champion like this that's more of just like a mash your buttons and throw shit out there. I don't see a champion that's this type of mage gonna get nerfed as hard because then we wouldn't be seeing Lux get like buffed every year, you know.
I hear you, but like from what I've seen, and from also just the way that they've designed him, I see him more in a Rise Light.
You know, there's some logic to that, but even his cooldowns aren't good enough
Uh-huh.
for him to be as silly as Rise or Azir
Yeah,
or Cassiopeia.
they're definitely not spammable in the same way
Yeah.
that Rise is. But they hit really, really hard. They scale harder than Rise does.
They
And
definitely do
again,
not scale better than Rise.
well, in terms of a single ability hit, they certainly do.
Rise is a whack job lunatic in the late game.
Oh yeah, because he can use his abilities so often. But I'm saying like one for one ability. His scale even harder, and he brings more utility to himself than Rise does. And I think the big thing about it is that they're designing him around requiring a high level of expertise, and therefore, like you saw, lots of hotfix buffs. Right, they're going to keep buffing him until like he gets close to a 50% win rate in generally skilled play, platinum plus. And I think once he gets to that point, the pro play scene is going to have him be so good they're going to have to start really ratcheting it back in the other direction and giving him nerf after nerf after nerf.
I'm not 100% convinced of anything you said, but I want to read the last triplet of shit he has before I only read his kit one time, so I don't remember a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now.
Did it take you 3 hours or 5?
I just kind of skimmed through it in like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking for things that jumped out at me, and the first thing I thought about was what I originally said. It looks like he just has a bunch of abilities from like 2010, you know?
Yeah, let's check out Subject Torment, where Hui enters a tumultuous mood. Great writing.
Okay. I'm not really concerned with what the 3 sections represent in terms of like mental status, unless that gives him cool visual effects, because I could see this guy having a good skin that would make up for his terrible base skin. Alright, first up, let's go to his EQ. I think we established the Q is definitely the DPS section, and the W seems to be more the utilitarian section, so I'm curious what the overall mood or theme of the E will be, and it looks like it's just more damage.
Utility, I think.
More? Okay, first up we've got, let's see, target direction knocks them down. I don't know if that's supposed to be similar to grounded. And fears. I forgot that he had a fear. That seems pretty cool. Slowed by 60%. And
Yeah, the fear's big.
Yep.
And that counts as an immobilized too. So you can hit him with lightning afterwards.
Yep, and that's if they don't fear in an awkward direction, then you're just looking like a fool because you missed something that you CC'd them into.
If you miss it, that's on you. But yeah, I think the fear does count as immobilized.
Then you'll be right up there with those Lee Sins who kick and then miss their Q.
Yeah, and remember that like they're also slowed during this fear, so you can basically just put the lightning strike on them, and they're not going to walk away from it.
Yeah, but if you do it prematurely, things like this are easy to miss.
Um, sure.
One thing to keep in mind if you want to learn something really simple, all charms make the target walk toward the source of the charm. All fears make the target walk in the exact opposite of the origin of the fear. That's how
Hmm.
charm and fear works for
Yep.
kiddos out there. Anyway, this one also has pretty nice. Base is obviously lacking, but this ratio is serviceable enough to be some ouchie. Usually, CC abilities tend to not have high damage on non ultimate spells. That's kind of a universal constant in champions in this game. But
Right,
this
and while
one's
the base
actually
damage,
packing some heat.
yeah, while the base damage is quite low here, 55% AP is nothing to sneeze at.
Oh no, it's 60 on mine. I don't think yours is the hot fixed version.
All right, let me reload. Yeah, I have the non-hotfix version here.
He got a lot of buffs in the hotfix, and they're all like ratios and base number changes.
Cool, cool.
There were no nerfs. First thing I want to point out is this is his cheapest of his three sets of abilities, but it has a cooldown that's not as crazy as the W, but much higher than the Q. So this is kind of a middle of the road, but the cheapest of all three, which is probably good. The CC ability might be the cheapest, I guess.
Right, and I mean, like you were saying, he can build a lot of ability haste, and feel good about it. So if you got 60 or 70 ability haste, I think you've got the cooldown at rank 5 down to about 6.5 seconds. You get a full 1 second fear every 6 seconds. That's awesome.
All right, and this next one is probably the most convoluted of all of the abilities in his kit. We got Gaze at the Abyss. Kind of reminds me of Swain's W, but something out of like Warcraft 2 from like 1995 we got going on here. He throws an eyeball into the target location, expands over a few seconds, it grants sight but not true sight, like a regular ward, and then after a split second or whatever being placed, it locks onto the nearest visible enemy champion. When it says nearest, I guess that's within the 350 radius, or maybe it's just in a big giant area. It doesn't specifically say.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
then
sure.
it says,
It might be further than the area if they happen to be visible.
and then immediately launches itself. I don't know if that is a lock on or it turns into a skill shot at that point. Doesn't mention that here. And then it collides with. Okay, if it says collides, then it must be a skill shot. And to a point where something can intercept it. If it collides with an enemy to hit to deal magic damage, and this also has the same damage as the EQ, which is pretty decent. This gives them true sight for 2.5 seconds, and then this roots them by a pretty generous amount. So
Yeah,
I
this
don't
is
know.
another immobilized right here.
I don't know if this has way too much setup to be consistent, or it actually all happens so fast that this thing's gonna like bust out and hit them really fast, and it all has to do with doesn't mention how fast the projectile speed is here, so it's hard to get a read on how consistent or good this ability would be.
I'm trying to look through the ultimate and see whether the expanding ability was that or whether it was the ultimate. No, his aura grows on his ultimate. That was the one that was doing tons of damage. With a champion like this, right? It's hard to figure out what they're doing and when. So I think I mixed this up with his ultimate a few times because they both grow in terms of like a zone. Um, and so I can't say that this was as destructive as it might have been. I think it was probably the ultimate I was thinking of that was doing like ridiculous amounts of damage and just merkin teams. So yeah, I don't know. Just from judging this from the writing here, the root is really good. Like if it's consistently at least hitting an enemy, you're doing really good here. The one drawback, like you said, is it's not quite as fast as something like the EQ, where you can just launch it in a target direction and boom, an enemy is hit. Um, so if he's under a lot of pressure, maybe he'll use the EQ. If you have a little bit more of a tactical advantage in the fight, you can use the EW for greater effect. Also, just again, never thought I would say Hui tosses an eyeball to the target location. Just wow.
Alright, this next one is also a slowing effect with some CC. He makes a little jaw that appears to function just like Oriana or Diana's ultimate, where if they're in the middle, they get kind of knocked up slowed, and if they're on the edge of it, then they get kind of pulled towards the center of the action.
Is this guy raiding cemeteries?
Well, this is probably his, like, depressed emo section.
Oh my god, why does he have an eyeball and a jaw?
So,
They're not even his.
I just now realized all three of these abilities actually do the same amount of damage. I don't really see a problem with that, honestly.
Yeah, that's fine. You pick your utility. Very nice slow on this, but it decays quickly, and I don't know what his range is. That would really determine whether the EE has any utility or not. I'm gonna see if I can look it up real quickly.
Yeah, I could see a lot of utility around this. It kind of seems a lot like Talia's E or W, except for the damage component. It also seems like it'd be kind of tough. It doesn't really say how big it is, but I'm betting this is probably pretty small.
Yeah, I don't see the range on this, and if it's not a long range, I don't see any reason you would use this over the EQ or EW. Like when you could root them or fear them, why would you just slow them down for 1 second?
Yep, that's true, because you could interrupt someone that's channeling with all three of these. So.
Yep. The one thing I will say is that the first two are only one enemy, and this is all enemies in the area. So maybe that's the usefulness of it.
That is true.
Yeah,
This
not
is...
only the slow, but the damage. This is AOE damage. So I guess yeah, that's probably what it is. If you're seeing a spot that like a brand ult would look good in, maybe that's when you use the EE.
So this is the Wombo choice?
Yep.
Alright. Alright, I feel like his E abilities kind of seemed the weirdest. I was really on board with the W action and the Q action. The E's kind of seemed like they ran out of decent ideas. I guess this is like the CC section or something. So, I don't know. Wasn't on as much board with the E business.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. You know, the Q or the W or the E. I don't know that you need to give him both a enchanter type utility skill and a trapper or catcher type utility skill. In addition to all this damage, it's just a weird design.
I can tell you one thing that jumps out at me for like support on this champion. The EE seems like something that could actually be very annoying and devastating because you know how I'm sure you've played against plenty of support Swain. You know how stupid and kind of much it fucks with your mind to play against Swain when he throws a thing that goes through the minion line. And this seems like something that would kind of mess with you if it just kind of shows up and you don't see an animation or a travel time or a projectile or something. So this seems like something that could kind of be kind of funky. And also, this gaze at the abyss thing, if you could just... Can you, like, put that in a bush next to someone and it just... Can they, like, not see it in there until it jumps out at you? I mean, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you can do that, yeah.
Okay, well, that seems kind of...
Yeah.
Kind of annoying, too.
Oh, also, worth, I guess, noting, and I just read this, so tell me if you don't think it's right, but it looks like the EQ is the first enemy hit, so you can actually, like, hit a minion with it. Like, the enemy can hide behind a minion and not get feared. Whereas, like, the EW is nearest enemy champion, and EE is everyone.
Well, the EQ just... I think, you know, the first minion that gets hit would get feared.
Yeah, I think you can basically hide behind a minion and avoid the fear, which is neat. Of course, they can just use the EW on you instead.
Well, it feels like the EW needs some setup time, and I'm just gonna safely assume that this thing doesn't fucking jump at you from like 800-900 away. Seems a bit excessive. I don't know. I'm gonna have to mess in a custom game after this to goof off and see how silly the EW is.
Yeah.
Okay. First off, we've got the portion of his R that's comboed while you're in his other three abilities, and all this does is cancel his abilities so you don't use the mana and you can go back to pick one of the other abilities. It's probably smart that they added this and you don't just have to use something to expend it.
Yeah, this is a nice interface convenience. If you're thinking like, oh, I probably want something Q, and then like you're looking through the other three abilities. Oh, which one do I use? Actually, none of them. Good that they can give you the the little mulligan there. All right, that's all I have to say about it. Let's talk the ultimate.
Alright, when I first read this the first time, I actually thought this was kind of underwhelming just from looking at the raw numbers and comparing it with stuff that other mages with like heavy damage ultimates have. But am I wrong? I mean, this would apply his what the hell was it? His WE and his passive multiple times, right? And that's what gives this most of its umph. If he procs, he starts with his WE, then throws it out, and then it would have proc his passive, right?
Does it proc the passive multiple times?
Or does it proc all three of his WEs also? Because
well, you have to hit with a different ability, so it can't just be two procs of his R. But yeah, I think basically you can if you have the R under them and they're not getting out of it, every time you hit them with one of your abilities, I think it will proc the passive. And I will say, like, I have seen people get absolutely destroyed. I've usually had the Hui on my team. But either way, like, I've been destroyed by it a few times. I've seen people get absolutely destroyed standing in a Hui R.
Well, the initial damage is kind of laughable, man. Doesn't scale well, and the little bit doesn't do much. But that would be the part that would apply his E or his passive, since it happens first. And then the detonation thing comes later.
The slow, I think, stacks to 100%.
According to this, it stacks to 120% for all that's worth. But your movement speed can't be reduced below 100.
110, I think. But yeah, somewhere right around there. Yeah, like when you see a 99% slow on an ability, it's basically changing their speed to 100, even if they're sped up. That's basically what it's doing for you. Either way, very hard to get out of it because the R is growing. So even if they're just slowed down to 100, like they're not getting out of it. And yeah, I think the point of it is first of all to keep procking the passive, which is pretty big, and then second of all to at the end of the ability you're also getting 400 damage plus 80% AP. That's pretty huge.
Well, can this actually trigger his passive more than once?
I believe it can. Again, you have to hit other abilities because the passive is you have to hit two different abilities.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, if they're standing in the R and they're constantly being ticked by the R, the first time you hit a Q, boom, triggers the passive. Then the first time you hit a W, boom, triggers the passive. So you're triggering the passive like twice as much while this is under them, essentially.
Yeah, because you're pretty much always going to trigger the passive because the instances of damage happen so quickly, even if it's for nothing.
Exactly. Every quarter second, this is giving you one out of the two procs for the passive.
Yep.
And yeah, so even though the damage per second is really tiny, that's the purpose of it. Did Invoker have anything like this?
Actually, his ultimate wasn't a damaging ability, but the whole rest of it is kind of pretty much the same. The Invoker, his like Q set was like a damage oriented set. His W set was like a utility section, and his E set was like a crowd control section.
And then what did his ultimate do?
I actually don't remember what his ultimate did. I haven't played Dota in a super long time. I think it like maybe it reset the cooldown on his other buttons or something like that.
Okay, pretty good, I guess. Being able to use 6 skills of your choice. But anyway, yeah, this has a long cooldown, level 6, 140 seconds. But level 16, 80 seconds, you'll be using this in every fight, given that Hui probably should have 50, 60, 70 ability haste at a minimum.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see this in game to get an idea for how fat it is. Is this like the size of Nunu's ultimate? It says the
It grows.
detonation radius is only 500.
It's big. Remember, that's a radius, not a diameter. That means that like it's the diameter of it, if you go from one side to the other, is like well bigger than a Caitlyn auto. And in addition to that, I think the original effect radius is 500. I think it keeps growing. I don't
Doesn't
think
say
500 is the final.
doesn't say anywhere on here that it gets bigger.
Yeah, afflicting them with an R that grows over 3 seconds, reveals the target,
Oh,
and grants sight within
you're
its
right.
radius.
You're right.
Yeah, I believe the actual like AoE we were taking these hits does grow.
Well,
Yeah.
considering this is an AoE effect and his passive is also a small AoE effect, this is some serious Wombo shenanigans considering his EE is also an AoE effect and
Oh, you know what
his
the 500 actually is? The 500 is the explosion at the end, I think. It says detonation radius 500.
well, that's all that really matters, right?
Yeah. Well, no. The area where you're taking those little plinks of damage to get hit by his passive more often is really big too,
You know,
or
in
really important.
in Diablo 2, there's a character called the
Uh,
Sorceress who has an ability that does exactly what this ability does.
I see.
I'm curious if it'll actually look the same. It's called like Ice Orb or Frozen Orb, and it does the same damn thing where it shoots out a bunch of thing and then blows up at the end.
Honestly, most of what Hui's skills look like are just everything is burning. Everything is burning with blue fire. It doesn't look icy, really.
That's cool. I sense some halfway decent skins in his future.
Yeah, I can see it, but obviously, that means more work, so they're probably only going to make ultimate skins for him.
Yep, I could see that.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Tell me
You,
what you think of this champion, because I certainly have my opinions.
well, I did notice just the maximum AP ratio on his ultimate is almost 100. That doesn't even combine all the potential crazy add-ons that he could get
Mm-hmm.
out of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The base numbers aren't that great for other champions in the game who have like a big ticket AoE ultimate like Ziggs or Lux or something like that. But like we said, we were talking about all the ways that this can proc his other buttons and stuff, so that definitely more than makes up for it. Honestly, I really like what I'm seeing there. This kind of feels like a throwback. This feels like a champion. I mean, the idea of having all these buttons isn't super revolutionary. Like Jace and Elise have been in the game a long time and stuff like that. He honestly has a good feeling of like a champion that came out like in 2011 or 12 or 13 or something like that. I like him. He does seem very strong. Other than the eyeball thing, it feels like there's a lot of super consistent damage and setup in his kit. He honestly seems like a champion I could see myself playing. I'm hoping he doesn't sound too turned offish, too Rakan like in game, which I'm sure he will. So that would be a deal breaker.
Of all the deal breaker voices, Rakan is the one you choose?
Dude, he is super annoying.
Bad call.
That is definitely the most annoying one that stands out in my mind right away. I'm sure if I thought about it, there's a few other ones that are pretty bad.
Man, if I have to hear like another line from like Talia.
I'm not over the moon for her, but she's definitely like 5 out of 10. I'm not. I hate it just as much as I'm fine with it.
Uh-huh.
Rakan, I would put it like a 2.
I actually enjoy Rakan's voice lines.
Yeah, it figures.
Yeah, well, he's basically me, except better looking.
So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this Ziggs 2.0 over here. This looks like a lot of fun, a lot of tools. It looks very. It honestly doesn't look very hard to play, even if you like don't remember what everything does. It feels like you could have a good time playing this, and
And
it
if you
wouldn't
were
be
gonna,
too hard to get through.
and if you were going to give him a rating out of 10,
Honestly, I think I'd have to give this like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10.
All right. Well, glad we can balance out to about a 5 because I don't like this guy very much.
Yeah, you know
I think
that.
he shares a lot of the problems that some of the recent champions have shared. He tends to int in the early game. Your team gets mad at the person who's playing him. Then he just goes off almost Aurelion Sol style late game. Basically just 1v4 in the enemy team. Too complicated for a multiplayer MOBA with 150 champs in it, where you already have to remember what 150 different champs do.
I
No
don't
reason
think
you should
it's.
have to remember 10 different abilities from one champion.
Yeah, he's got a lot of abilities, but none of them are really complicated.
None of them are that complicated, but there's a lot to remember in terms of, like, if I'm fighting this guy, what do I have to do to get around him? I would also ask, what is his weakness besides just inting the early game? What is his
Uh,
weakness?
well, like
He
most.
doesn't have any. He doesn't have any interesting design flaw, or not design flaw. He doesn't have any interesting flaw in
Well,
his kit.
what do you think Xerath or Lux or Ziggs' weaknesses are?
Xerath,
Not really
Lux, and
Ziggs.
Ziggs. You want me to say Ziggs in particular? First of all, Ziggs can't deal with tanky guys. He needs too many rotations of spells. Um, Second of all, he doesn't have a lot of utility for himself. He just has that little like satchel charge.
I
Um,
I meant to say like Lux or Xerath. I think they're better examples.
okay. Lux and Xerath, if they get closed in on, they're dead.
Well, I don't think that's untrue of this guy.
No, he has the slow. He has the speed up for himself. He can shield himself if he's getting hit. He still can be exploded by multiple people pretty easily, but compared to like Xerath, somebody closing on Xerath, Xerath's if you're closed in on Xerath and he hits his E, it only stuns you for half a second. Like this guy can fear you for 1 second or root you for 2 seconds, and speed himself up to get away.
Yep.
There is no real vice to combine with the virtue of flexibility. Not to mention lots and lots of damage.
I
I
think
know that the numbers don't look huge, but he does lots and lots of damage. Trust me, I've seen him
no.
in about
Oh
10
no,
games.
no. I don't doubt it. The numbers I think are pretty good.
Yeah,
I think with the ease of the application of his passive and his WE, I do think he's I think his damage is getting pretty
yeah.
crazy.
I just think this is an overloaded, overly complex kit with too much warping effect on the game. Same as like an Aurelion Soul, where he feeds early and then dominates late.
I don't
I
think
feel
it's
like
even. I don't think it's even close to Aurelion Soul.
it's not Aurelion Soul levels, but I'm just saying in that same vein, he has that same type of like he really can 1v4 late game if he plays well.
Okay, I don't really think that's much of an argument.
I mean, I don't know too many champs that can 1v4 late game just
First
by
off,
playing
I
well. Even
sincerely doubt this champion could do that. And
I've watched him
I
do it.
suspect that what they were probably thinking when they designed this champion is he's
Uh-huh.
just another mage that has like good damage, but like not really any utility. And no, not running away at like
Oh, he
20%
definitely
movement
has
speed
utility.
isn't like insane mobility.
That's the thing. No, he definitely has utility. That movement speed is big, but in addition to also having a reliable CC on someone, that is huge.
I didn't say he didn't have utility. I said he didn't have much mobility.
Oh, you said mobility. Sorry, I thought you said utility.
And I imagine that's
It's
probably what
true.
they were thinking when they designed this champion.
Sure, but that's a case to be made with all mages, and most of them, like don't have the level of utility that he has, nor the ability to bring out consistent damage like this. Yeah. So between the complexity, the information requirement on everybody who plays the game, the warping effect on the game, and just the overload in his kit, I've got to give this a 3 out of 10. I don't think this is very good at all. I don't think it's the worst thing they've ever done, but this was pretty disappointing to me.
Yeah. You're never happy unless they put out some champ who's a pile of crap.
I completely disagree with that.
And this guy, he is like super skill shot dependent, which is probably another reason they thought he was balanced or more balanced.
Yeah, the skill shots don't seem like they're that hard to hit. It's not like he's Tryndamere or or somebody who can just point and click everyone. Um, it's definitely like it takes a lot of skill to play this guy, right? Any champion with 9 buttons, it probably will.
Well, what I think is the biggest like gateway to him actually being broken. I don't think this
Uh,
is going to be a broken champion in the terms of. I understand why you say Aurelion Sol is bad or too good or whatever. I understand why you say that because he has infinite scaling that scales redonkulous. Once he gets to a certain point, it only becomes easier for him to scale the later the game goes. But
yeah,
that's because his early game is beyond useless garbage. His
right.
laning
Again, I
phase
don't,
is absolutely miserable.
as I've been saying all year and a half or whatever since he's been reworked, right? That's not a balance issue. That's a game warping, like a game health issue.
Well, it's
That's the
just a,
point where like it almost doesn't matter how well your team is playing early game. You're
uh,
still gonna get smashed, and it doesn't
no.
matter how well the other
That's
team is playing late game; they're gonna get smashed.
That's completely wrong. If he has a really bad laning phase, he's missing out on a lot of opportunities to use his E to farm his Stardust. And if he has a really poor Stardust laning
Game good.
phase, then he's going
Mm-hmm.
to scale a lot slower. Just like every scaling champion in the game, if they
Still
get
stay out like
slowed down
crazy
a
if
lot
the game
early,
gets to
they're not as
30.
good later.
He still scales like crazy if the game gets to 30 because he can still just vaporize waves.
I do think he scales really well.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think those are the problems with Hui's design. I think this is, and I've been saying this a lot this season for the champions that they've made and reworked. I think this is going to be one of the most problematic champions in terms of trying to balance it. And I think that where you put a lot of blame on the balance team for doing a job that is almost impossible, and saying that they don't have two brain cells to rub together, I think that the design team is absolutely sabotaging the already mediocre balance team.
I do think a lot of
By
the
making
recent
champions like
champions
this.
have been lacking in quality, but other than this guy's look, I don't think, and probably his voice actor, I don't think that's his problem. Because I'm never gonna think a champion is like too strong when all of his damaging abilities are skill shots. So
That's an interesting theory. I don't agree with it, but it's an interesting way to think. These skill shots aren't that hard to hit, and again, once you hit one, right, because you have the CC, or once of your one of your allies point and click somebody with like a fiddlestick skill. Fiddlesticks is like one of the greatest examples of like a garbage champion that that can just like point and click CC anyone they want.
he doesn't have that.
The fiddlestick? Oh, no, no. I'm saying like if he has like a fiddlesticks on his team, then you don't even need to bother like lining up your skill shots. It's just automatic hits.
Well,
Yeah.
comparing
Um.
something to Fiddlesticks is not valid because he's a cheese lord.
You mentioned fiddlesticks. Your argument is not valid. I guess what I'm saying is even if you don't have a cheese lord on your team like that, right? If Hui hits, for example, the fear on someone for the next second and a half or whatever, every skill shot is going to hit, right? Because the enemy can't dodge it. So I think that if the ability to just do damage to too many people too quickly is too high, I think even if every item in the kit is a skill shot, he can absolutely be a balance problem.
Well,
And I think that's going to be the case. I think you're going to see this guy in the balance patches. I'm going to set the over under at 14 times next season.
it's not even much of an argument. They dick with every champion a million times every season.
14 times? I
I
bet there's
I don't know
probably
what
two
the
or three
numbers
champions that
is,
have ever appeared that many times in a season.
but because he's a newer champion, yeah, I expect him to get changes.
You'll definitely like see a lot of change in like the next 4 or 5 patches, but I don't think it's gonna stop there. I think we can welcome him as a regular in the patch notes for years to come.
I think he'll get nerfed, but I don't think it'll be by much. And then I think after that, I don't think he'll get changed much at all.
All right. We'll see. We'll see.
Because
I think for a
there's
champion
nothing
like this,
overtly like powerful about his kit. It's like I keep saying, it's a bunch of like low impact abilities from like 2010. Yeah, his ultimate's strong, but the
with
strength of
ones
this
of them,
ultimate is his like passive and his E and stuff. It's a spam ability kit, not like a high impact kit. You know.
yeah, you're definitely underestimating the value of versatility or flexibility in a champion's kit.
I
The
100%
more
agree.
the more situations that a champion has a tool for, the more powerful they are. Full
Oh no,
stop.
I totally agree. That's why you'll never see like that's why you never see like Garen or Nasus or Shaco in the pro scene because they're too one dimensional.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I totally agree with you.
And I
I
think when you design champions with too much flexibility, they become balance nightmares.
well, we'll see.
That's known as kit overload.
I don't think he's. I think he's strong for sure, but I don't think he's as bad or worse than Aurelion Sol in the way that you think he's bad or something.
No, 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 no. He's definitely not worse than Aurelion Sol in that that game warping sense. But he is problematic in the same sense, in nature if not in scale. And then he also has the kit overload and the complexity problems. So that's why I think he's poorly designed. And I think if I showed you a champion like this in one of our champion judgments, you would rightly roundhouse me.
Well, the idea of making like 12 abilities is of course radical, but if your abilities were all like very simplistic and like low impact and stuff, and we were talking about a mage, I don't think it would be that crazy.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to bloat our video with 12 different skills next time.
Alright, and then we'll go down here to the December 7th hotfix, but it's pretty much like I said earlier, they just buffed everything in his kit that does damage by like 5%. Except his ultimate. They buffed all of his Q spells by a little bit, and they buffed all of his E damage by a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna probably find that with a champion when people are just getting used to him and he's very complex. Look for this to go the other way in a couple months.
Maybe. And it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't see them taking a huge, heavy hand on
Yeah.
this champion like they did
Honestly,
Briar.
like the people who are good enough to like within the first month get really good at Way and use them in his overpowered state. More power to them. Like they deserve the elo they're getting.
Well, got anything else to say?
Uh, Not really, Chrissy. It's been a pleasure doing this with you this year, and we made it. We made it through 24 patches. I'm really hoping that Riot can just clear the blur out of their eyes and do a better job with their systems design next year.
Tuh. Yeah, right.
The split pushing has been ridiculous. The gold distribution has been ridiculous. The kind of the mid scale item updates this year have been really bad. And
I've honestly never felt happier playing other games. You know, with
do
the
you feel like
direction they've taken League,
you
and
feel like you're? Mhm.
what I
Do you,
saw on the, I mean, it'll probably take us like 2 or 3 hours or something to go over the preseason changes next couple weeks or whatever.
I'm
But man,
excited
what
for it.
I've saw in those changes has just made me so depressed. I mean, they are taking such mainstays out of the game, and I know you think like everything they change is like fucking brilliant, revolutionary. It's amazing. It's
No, I
unhealthy.
don't.
I mean, but it's like
You
I,
just said I'm not happy with anything. Come on, pick a lane.
two things can be true at once.
Who-
You know. Uh,
Okay, the sky cannot be blue and not be blue.
I said you're. I don't know.
Okay, you can't square a circle, as I think Descartes said.
I don't know. I just saw a
Uh,
lot of things that
mhm.
that feel very uncomfortable and alienating. I mean, I'm tired of seeing them constantly add things to the game, and then for them to stay in the game, and for people to, you see them a lot and consistently in games, and then for them to just randomly take them out of the game, and then you literally just get fucking like 50 new items and the next season. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's nothing that people can consistently emotionally attach to, and this is like a sign that this game is over the hill and is going downhill now. And the more they desperately try to like make the game appealing by like, I don't know, going in ARAM world or Earth Town, I think the more they're gonna find people like turning off from the game. That's my take on it.
I really just kind of wish they would take maybe next time they had the game in like anything close to a stable and balanced state. I wish they would take a few months off
Exactly.
and not even worry about all these little changes. Not even worry about trying to mess things up that aren't broken, but really sit down and talk and say what is the purpose of every single like class of champion that we have in this game.
I know these guys needed to take.
What types of items do they need? And what is the role that people want to play? And just really start designing things from there.
Riot needed to take a book out of like what have been like the most successful esports of the past, and you can think of like it has been. You can think of like Counter-Strike, you can think of like StarCraft 1, you can think of like Warcraft 3. These are things that have been successful in like genre-defining esports since like the late 90s or something. And one thing those games got in common is they didn't try to reinvent the fucking wheel every year. They had lightning in a bottle, and the people at the time knew it to some degree, and they knew the formula they had, and they didn't try to like change it dramatically all the time. You know?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think that there were a ton, even as League of Legends was a very popular game, right? In its first several years, there were a ton of design issues there that in some cases, they came up with a new system and they actually made it a lot better, right? I know that we disagree on new runes, but I think that they were brilliant. I think turret plating was a great change. Changing the way that like each turret worked in each different lane was stupid, but turret plating itself was great.
You see, a lot of that stuff you say now.
Yeah.
But how many of that stuff can you like look me in the face and say, before they told you it was a problem, man, I really knew that was a problem in League of Legends?
Me, probably 100% of it.
How did I know that was going to be your answer? You always say that shit.
Well, because I actually think about the design of the game. Think about the old Drakes, right? The old Drakes literally were just like what, a few hundred gold split across your team. By the time you got to the second Drake, it was barely worth anything. And it was also just completely infantile to try and take it. Like there were a lot of problems with the old objectives. Old Baron Nashor was just extra stats.
That's what the new one does.
If you read Regen, well, the new one, it's all about sieging. The new one actually thoughtfully breaks the game open when the game is in a stalemate because the other team has like a Ziggs and a Teemo and a Jinx that are just wave clearing everything and staying behind their turret. Having the Baron means that if you take it, now you can buff off your minions. They're a lot harder to just wave clear. You can actually push the game forward, forcing the other team to come out from behind their lines of defense and contest you at Baron. That type of thing is very thoughtful. And that's the type of thing that I think in its like mid-years, like from maybe Season 5 to Season 10, Riot did a lot of good work with. And now it's like half the stuff they do just doesn't have any point. It makes it worse than the problem they were trying to deal with in the first place. Support items. I could have told you in my first season, Season 3, that supports do not feel impactful after the first third of the game. They're just vision bots. Right? Support items, while they came out in an undertuned state, were one of the smartest things they've ever done. And these were not hard flaws to identify, but they really thought through, what does this champion want to do? What do they want their role to be in the game? And I think that I think the best example of them just losing the entire like plot line is the reworks to the lethality items, and especially to the ADC items in this season. They've just completely lost the plot line.
I don't
And I
have
hope
like
they do a better
1 year to point to where I think the game should be like roughly locked in time, but I
job.
would like to see them just make like balance the game as often as like StarCraft 2, where like maybe like once or twice a year they come out with a modest, very modest list of balance changes. And the game is getting to a point where it's more cluttery than charming because they're just starting to overload the game with so many goofy features. And then
Yeah,
when it gets to that point, they'll take out some goofy features and then just fill it up with some more goofy features. Like next season, like the red and blue buff are also going to be like crazy goofballs too. I'm like, I mean, how much shit in the jungle is like crazy bullshit now? I mean, that's just off the top of my head.
yeah. I mean, when you have 150 champions, right, you have to get more and more creative with each one. But when you add things that are too wacky, um,
Now, other than coming
it,
out with new champions, I'm fine with them continually pumping out new champions, like a few of them a year. But other than
yeah,
that, I think they should really pump the brakes and shit.
yeah. Just improve what's there. When you add things that are too wacky to a new champion, to a champion rework, to an item that you just decide you want a new item in the game, then you often have to add a lot of like small details that like trim the extra power and the abuse cases from it. That's why you have skill descriptions that are 24 lines long now. And when you do that, then like you said, there's so much clutter in the game that there's more clutter than charm. So really hope they just take a step back in the coming year. I know that they take some time off, during the holidays usually,
Ah,
and they just take that time to think: do we really need all of this clutter? And especially just think about what role do people want to play in this game, and how can we allow them to achieve that role without feeling like we have to be indebted to all of our past stuff.
that they have absolutely no uh, loyalty to the past. That is one thing this company has never had.
I that's probably true, but
You don't
I
make the
still think.
amount of changes they've made to literally
Mhm.
like everything and care about precedent or what came before.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases they may not even know what came before. Like there does seem to be a lot of turnover in the design departments right now. And maybe what they need, in that particular respect, is just really good historians to document everything that was done in the past and why. Not only the design things, the code changes, right? Like there's no excuse for every time you go back and fix an old bug, having a new bug introduced for several patches. I think maybe they just need good historians and people to actually document what was done and why it was done.
If they had good historians, we'd just hear stuff like, dude, Vi was always gay and Varus was always transsexual or also gay or something. It would just be
I don't
revisionist.
want to.
It would just be revisionist
I don't want
history.
to end our season with that.
It would just be revisionist history. That's what we'd be like. Don't you remember the 2009 lore?
I do not want to end our season with that. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right. But yeah, I really wish they would just think about things in a more fundamental sense of what do people want to do in their roles. How does that affect the way that other roles in the game feel? And what is the most minimalistic set of like items that we can come up with that allow people to do that?
I was like just getting used to like, feeling comfortable with getting mythics, and of course that's going out the door. We joked about that last episode, were they going to make all the items so fucking broken that everything would be a mythic, or are they going to make all the mythics so garbage they'll all be legendaries? Because you know it's going to be one or the other. And we were joking about that last episode, and now it's like, now they're just taking half of them out of the damn game. They're taking like Gore Drinker, Divine Sunderer out of the game. I'm like, what? You got to take at least the unpopular ones out of the game. There are so many champs that build that shit, it's ridiculous. And no, I know this one's unpopular, but I broke my heart. They're taking Radiant Virtue out of the game, so now I'll never have the satisfaction of building Heartsteel and Radiant Virtue at the same time on Shen.
All right. So I think we've gone a while, and I want to end this on a happy note. What is the best thing Riot has done to their game in 2023?
Adding Heartsteel. Adding Heartsteel and the Aurelion Soul rework.
Yeah,
and
you really like it.
Was the Udyr rework this year?
I don't think that was this year. I think that was last year.
Oh, okay, because that one was a stroke of genius as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, adding Heartsteel and the Aurelion Soul rework.
I'm gonna say I'm a big fan of them allowing the jungler to share buffs without having to give away their buff. I think that has eliminated some of the stupidity and toxicity from the jungle role. And yeah, I don't think we've had anything better, but I think that was a nice little change.
You're right. That is probably the first actual thing they've done to literally reduce toxicity, like maybe ever.
Yeah.
They talk about it, but when do they do tangible things to reduce toxicity? Like never.
So there you go. A couple good things that they definitely did this year, right? It wasn't a total loss, but yeah, hoping we can read some 24-ish patches next year, and just be happy about most of them.
All right. Well, I haven't picked out a new champion for our next thingamabobber yet. I guess I really need to start thinking about that. I'm not really sure who it's going to be. But hopefully we'll bust that out on New Year's Day, so that'll be kind of fun. Other than that, I'm not sure we'll be doing another video the rest of the year.
Yeah, not unless there's some special topic that we come up with that would be really cool to talk about. I guess we'll just enjoy a few weeks break.
Yeah.
And come back charged for 2024, right?
Yep. If I haven't found someone better by then.
Well, it's not that hard, Chrissy. You just need to try harder.
Okay, man. Guys, see you next year.